So, what is the description of your job and your job title?
Well, my title is Assistant Athletic Director for Broadcasting and Media Relations. This is my 10th year at Belmont, and I'm primarily charged to oversee all public relations, media relations, press coverage of our 17 athletics teams, and most specifically men's basketball, which takes up a majority of my time, in particular in March.
What are the primary tasks you perform?
Well, that's far-reaching. I maintain our official athletic website, BelmontBruins.com. Myself and two full-time employees and 3 graduate assistants kind of divvy up the sport assignments, pitch stories to media members, and then just really try to the best we can, promote our athletic program both locally, regionally, and nationally.
I'm gonna cover it up so I can know when I do a different question. In what department do you work, and whom do you report to?
Well, I work in the athletic department here at Belmont University, and my 2 main supervisors would be our athletic director, Mike Strickland, and our men's basketball head coach, Rick Bird.
What is your educational background, and how did it prepare you for your job?
Well, I have a little bit of an unusual or uncharacteristic academic and experience background to get into intercollegiate media relations. I went to Wake Forest University in North Carolina, but majored in economics and minored in communications. And for the longest time, I thought I was going to get into a career in business, finance, mutual fund research. But while I was Wake Forest, I worked in their athletic department. And in my senior year, I had a television internship at the NBC affiliate there. And I pursued it. It was a really great experience, and I ended up going to graduate school at Syracuse University, and they have a great broadcast journalism program that kind of led me back into communications. But before I got to Belmont, I was in radio and television for about 8 or 9 years, was a sports anchor, and then I worked 2 years as a producer at the Golf Channel. And so most people in what I do here in intercollegiate athletics, they kind of work their way up as student assistants as an undergraduate, get a graduate assistantship or an internship upon graduation, and then go to smaller schools and eventually into Division I. So it's kind of a stair-step approach within sports information or media relations, rather than in my role, I was kind of on the other side. I was the reporter, and now I'm the one who's pitching the stories.
Where did you work as an anchor?
I worked as an anchor at 2 stations in my hometown of Rochester, New York. I covered the Buffalo Bills, the Syracuse Orange, St. Bonaventure.
I know that. In getting your job, what do you think helped you the most?
Good question. Honestly, in getting my job here at Belmont, the things that were most important were Belmont was looking to grow. They had just made the NIT in 2004 in men's basketball, and they were trying to find somebody who could use their contacts to kind of promote the athletic department and use it as a vehicle to kind of marry the growth of the university. And I had a little bit of a non-traditional background that I think Dr. Fisher and Mr. Strickland thought that was a perfect fit for the university at the time. But more importantly, I actually, through networking, had a chance to get to know Coach Bird through a mutual friend at the Golf Channel. And that's what I impress upon young people, is to try to network and build relationships as best they can, whether it's in their field or just other walks of life, because you never know how those relationships can really help you later down the road.
What does your typical day look like?
Well, Craig, that's an interesting question, especially with the NCAA tournament here this week. What's a typical day? A typical day is usually me, digesting what's going on in our athletic program. And during this overlap of the winter and spring season, it's exceedingly busy. You've got indoor track and basketball winding down, and then you've got golf, tennis, outdoor track, baseball, softball getting going in the spring. So it's an extremely busy time. And just making sure that between our full-time and student staffs that all of the games are covered, both from a media relations, PR standpoint, but also from staffing. We video stream a lot of our events, so that involves staffing from a video standpoint. highlights and interviews, which Ray McDonald does for us, photography, scoreboard, and stat keeper upkeep. So there's a lot involved, but in particular this week, this would not be a typical week. Now basically, this is basically my typical day since Belmont made the NCAA tournament. It's fielding dozens, if not hundreds, of calls from around the country and booking Coach Bird and our players for media interviews and just trying to promote our program and as it pertains to men's basketball as best as possible.
What would you say like the hardest part of having so many sports instead of just being able to focus on men's basketball or baseball?
It's interesting. A lot of the larger schools, the quote-unquote Power 5 conference schools, they usually have larger budgets and they're able to define niche roles for their staff members. And so, whereas we basically have myself, my colleague Kenesha Roan, and then John Langdon is full-time, but he's more compliance and then does golf and tennis, and then we have student assistants. Larger departments have usually 8 to 12 actual full-time staff members, and they usually get 1 or at the most 2 sport assignments that allows them to almost just have a laser focus on a particular sport. There are pros and cons to it. The pro being you get to know the coaches, the student athletes, and you're more intimately attached to all of the teams because you have to have an awareness level of all of them. But at the same time, it does, pile on, and you have to balance your time really, really well and realize that, I may have a lot on my plate with golf or tennis or something, but I have to trust my colleagues to handle that. And my main focus right now has to be with men's basketball because it is, of the utmost benefit to the university as a whole to maximize the coverage for them. So, long story short, I think people at our level get a chance to build relationships and get to know the kids better, where it's a little bit less familiar at larger schools. As I think some of our coaches and student athletes can see, we're running around and doing almost every role. We joke that we're kind of Jack and Jills of all trades, whereas a lot of other schools, again, they're just focused on 1 or 2 things.
What would you say are some highlights and some least favorite parts of your job?
The highlights, again, it's just getting to know the kids, getting to know the coaches, and just building those lasting relationships. Belmont is a great place. The kids here are wonderful. And, I'd honestly have a hard time doing what I do at a lot of other schools where the people in my position are worrying more about crisis management, keeping the kids off the police blotter, academic compliance issues, things that are more crisis communication rather than promotional communication. Things that are challenges, obviously, balancing professional life and family life. I have a wife and 2 young daughters, and that's really, really hard this time of year. My wife joked that when Taylor Barnett made the shot against Murray State, she was excited for Belmont, but she knew it was going to be pretty much another 2 weeks of me, running around and not seeing me as much. So that's the biggest challenge. A lot of people in what we do in particular, there's a high turnover rate. There's a high burnout rate because people get to a certain point professionally and they are looking to get more traditional 9 to 5 hours, fewer nights, fewer weekends, and juggling that life, family, and work balance is challenging, but you can do it. It's very similar to what the coaches deal with as well.
How would you define public relations?
Public relations, people define it differently. I would say in this day and age, with the advent of new media, social media, technology, it's changed a lot. Traditional PR was more about printing stories to the newspaper beat writer, and that was how you would get your maximization of coverage. But nowadays, you really have to be keenly aware of online sites, Twitter followers, Instagram, YouTube, things like that, and think more globally and outside of the box and just laser focused again on more traditional forms of media. Print and radio are helpful and they're vehicles for us, but for us, TV, online, and social media are great equalizers to maximize our coverage when compared to the Tennessees, the Vanderbilts of the world. At the end of the day, it's just about marrying perception and reality. And thankfully for Belmont, we don't have to sell something that's contrived or fake or put on an air. What you see is what you get. I mean, Coach Bird is the genuine article. His players are the same way. So I think other programs may have to, I don't want to say create a public image that might be as starkly contrasting to who they really are. But in what we do is just trying to tell a story of Belmont that creates a picture of who are these teams, who are these kids, and what brought them to the university, and how do they complement the university. And that's our main role, is just at the end of the day to, shed light on the school and open doors.
What made you want to pursue the sports side of PR?
I've just been a sports junkie my whole life. I played 3 sports in high school. I was, I see the kids playing, and I'm almost living vicariously through them. I just wasn't good enough to do it at the level that they do it. Again, I just think God has gifted me in terms of being able to write and, the opportunity to do basketball games with Kevin Ingram on the radio. That's been another tool where my education has married my passion, and I've been able to pursue that. It's just, at the end of the day, it's people ask me, how did you get into what you do, and how do you enjoy it? It's almost like, a fantasy camp. You're living out your dream of, we're courtside at Rupp Arena or at Cameron Indoor, now going back to the tournament. At the end of the day, it's just trying to find a way to use your gifting to promote and benefit others. This really is a service industry. PR, I'm not promoting stories, I'm doing an interview with Craig here, but I'm not doing stories about me. I'm trying to promote the teams and the kids. And so I see it as a real blessing that I'm able to, hopefully be a vehicle to give and provide, our teams and our coaches and our student athletes, things that'll be lasting for them, some good experiences.
What does a typical game look like for you? Basketball game, or both basketball?
Typical basketball game, I mean, there's a lot of prep work that goes in, both from, for me, it's twofold. One, I have to try to get the media members who will attend prepared for the game. Who's the opponent? What's their story? Who's Belmont? What's our story? But also for myself as an announcer, I have to actually prepare for myself. What has the team done? I'll actually watch some tape on the visiting team, see what they're doing offensive and defensively, so I can actually sound somewhat intelligent on the air. So it's twofold. I try to prepare the media members who come to the game, then I have to prepare myself and educate myself on the team. I watch practice a lot to see what Belmont's doing and how they change their schematics from game to game. But at the end of the day, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of behind-the-scenes logistical things that have to get taken care of in terms of game day staffing, roster cards, game notes, again, the video crew, a lot of things that people don't see and take for granted that have to get done. And I'm one of many who try to do that for Belmont.
What advice would you give a public relations student or a person that's trying to get a job in your field?
The biggest thing I tell young people who want to get into this industry, it's twofold. One, you got to knock down as many doors as you can and try to get as many positive experiences as you can. Nashville affords young people more opportunities than most cities. I mean, you've got Belmont here, and it's a great program, but you've got Vanderbilt across the street, the Titans and Predators literally across the street, and those are opportunities and internships and shadowing experiences that a lot of people across the country won't have opportunities to. And those are influential people who can, A, vouch for you, and vouch for who you are as a person, but also your work capabilities. And after those experiences are over, you'll have great portfolio, resume type pieces to help show future employers. But as I alluded to earlier, the biggest thing really is to relationship build and network. And you'll be surprised. A lot of times young people will say, oh, well, that guy might be a doctor or a lawyer, and I don't want to get into that field. But you never know, just by befriending them, their next door neighbor might, be,